Good to be here, Paul. I have a very special announcement to make. My family is putting up our beloved Montauk Beach House. That's right, 4 bedrooms, renovated recently, chef's kitchen, ocean views. This could be a great investment property. This could be an opportunity for some of you younger ad execs to have a little party house. The sky's the limit. I'm hosting a virtual open house tomorrow. Who's willing to come? Oh, we got a couple of jokesters over here, but I don't really understand. I did all my research. This is literally the perfect audience of prospective buyers. I mean, you guys all have the right household income, right? Most of you have been to the Hamptons in the last 18 months, and all my internet research has shown that that you will have a high index of looking at second properties. What's going on here, Paul? It doesn't make any sense. Wait, did you guys come here expecting something else? Is this not the right place or right time? Man, being contextually irrelevant really is awkward. Now that I have your attention, guys, we are happy to be here. My name is Brian Danzis. I'm the managing director of Seedtag. With me is Paul Goldbaum, our CTO. And we're going to talk today about how AI will unlock a new era of advertising. And you guessed it, contextual is going to be an integral part of it. Now, if you haven't heard of Seedtag, we're an 8-year-old company based out of Madrid. We have 450 employees across 12 different countries, and we work with some of the world's largest publishers, brands, and advertisers. Now, our talk here is about contextual, and contextual has been in the news a lot recently, but contextual isn't really a new targeting tactic. It's been part of advertising for many, many years, but it's changed and it's evolved. It's evolved even in the course of my career. And when I look back at when I got started in the ads business back in the late 90s, I first started working at Turner Broadcasting, and then I joined a couple of small sports cable networks in the early 2000s, and we weren't rated. So how are we going to position ourselves and our audience to buyers? Well, we had to have this perceived understanding of what our demographic composition was, and effectively use context as a proxy for audience. Now, we ran MRI studies from time to time. We touted the largest VIPs. You know, we were always the leaders in the VIP department on our upfront presentations. But essentially, we had to rely on what people's perception of us was. And buyers were fine-tuned to this, right? They were conditioned to think about audiences and particular niche audiences, right? So, generally speaking, most people could assume back then that women consumed lifestyle networks and men watched sports, and older, affluent audience were the ones that watched the news. It wasn't very inclusive, was it? Placing people into these broad buckets and making assumptions about them, but that's what we did. Now, savvy buyers, right, got to started thinking about these niche audiences, and they wanted to connect with people that were passionate and engaged in this. And that's how they wanted to align their brands. Now, fast forward a couple of years, I switched over my career to the digital world, and the power of the cookie allowed us to now target people on a more specific basis. You didn't need to make these generalizations or guesses about content. You kind of knew who people were based upon their internet searches and data that you could buy in a variety of different online exchanges and storefronts, right? The power of the cookie. And I worked for companies that pioneered some of the early addressability. And we talked about zero waste. We talked about the holy grail of targeting on a one-to-one basis, right? And resolving the individual. And so much so when programmatic took off a couple of years later, we got obsessed with it, right? Everyone was just focused on these audiences and buying these predetermined buckets, these off-the-shelf behavioral targeted data that oftentimes wasn't even right. And we followed people around the internet wherever we could, targeting them with these messages based purely on their demographics and some basic behavioral traits. Now, of course, social media took this to a whole nother level, right? The first-party walled gardens, they had their own data because they would collect it from users willing to give it up. Even music platforms could infer who you were, or even the mood you were in, based upon the music you listened to. And it got a little bit out of control. right? To the point now where media is so fragmented, users are found anywhere, that we'll use any point in the day to drop an impression. But is it the right thing to do? Just basically, making the assumption on someone's predetermined demographic? Is that the right time and the right place to deliver a message? And I would submit, probably not, right? I could know with absolute certainty that, Paul, you're in the market to buy a car. But if I'm reaching you while you're researching symptoms for your sick kid, that's going to piss you off, right? Or me, placing me in a parental parenting bucket. I got 3 kids. Not really helpful to Pampers, though, when my kids are teenagers and clearly out of diapers. So knowing the right time and place used to be the heart and soul of what we did in the ad world. And we become so focused on these predetermined buckets and placing people through these assumptions, we've lost a lot of the meaning behind what we do. And consumers have become desensitized to it. They avoid, they skip. Blocking is on the rise once again. And they're starting to question, where are we getting all this data from? Where is it coming from? What do you know about me? How do you know about me? And it's becoming a real issue here. A lot of people talk about deprecation of cookies, but privacy is an even bigger issue. And the consumer is acting, right? They're undertaking all these behaviors and voluntarily blocking cookies from the one browser that still allows it. And they're using products like Apple's Private Relay in beta right now. But governments now are really taking action. What started with GDPR, and now in California, Connecticut, Colorado, Virginia, they're all enacting their own legislation. And it may be federalized soon with the America Online Data Privacy Protection Act, right? So it'll limit people, targeting people under the age of 17. It could challenge a number of audience networks out there that are tracking people across the internet. It could upend categories like pharma that uses sensitive information. So people are acting, governments are acting, and we've created quite a mess. And a lot of the talk in this upfront has been, fighting against Nielsen and going after alternative currencies, right? But is having an incrementally better understanding of a demographic, is that really the answer? I would submit to you that we need to get back to basics. We need to think about the time and the place and emotion and people's passions if we're going to bring the soul back to advertising. And that's, quite frankly, when I had an epiphany. I've spent my entire career trying to resolve the individual, either using first-party publisher data, thinking about new currencies, or doing the work in addressability. I submit to you it's time to get back to basics and making contextual, understanding the environment with which you speak to people, the primary targeting tactic that you begin with. So how do we do this? How do we connect with consumers in a privacy-first world and respect them with messages that are tailored to things that they care about? Well, you guessed it, it's using contextual AI. And not just contextual AI, but custom contextual AI. And Paul's going to talk a little bit about what that does, but it means delivering ads in a personalized way, not to you based on your age and gender, but to what you care about, what you want to see, what matters in that moment. And how can we make that happen? It's with Liz. Liz is our AI, and she was born 8 years ago. It's in the very fabric of Seedtag's DNA. It influences everything that we do, every brief that we respond to, every decision that we make, from a placement of an ad to the actual creative of the ad. And Liz, like I said, was born 8 years ago, is getting smarter by the day. She understands 7 different languages, is processing thousands of publishers. In fact, she reads 60 million articles a day, which would take you 228 years just to read what that is doing alone today. So it is a tremendous amount of data that's being crunched and being analyzed. And what started as page-level analysis, which was helpful for understanding brand safety and suitability and keywords, we've moved beyond just visual analysis to semantic analysis, and now understanding what's happening in the contextual universe. What are people reading? What are they talking about? What's important to that? And what are the overlaps happening at a network level? This is a game changer, and this is what's going to fuel our custom AI.
Yep. Let's go.
You go, sir.
Thanks, man. Cool. So over the past few minutes, I think we've established why we believe there's a change going on in the world that brands cannot ignore if they want to continue to be relevant in this user attention fight that users are constantly submitted to. But what does this actually mean in practice? We've talked a bit about it, but what should we really do about it? And for one, as Brian was already saying, I think this is going to require us to rethink a lot of the fundamentals of how we operate as an industry. And we want to go back to one of the areas where I think there's a lot of room to improvement, which Brian already mentioned, which is how we're thinking about the audiences, how we're defining them, how we're characterizing, how we're activating them. And for that, I'm going to start with an example from the contextual world, from our day-to-day at Seedtag. You see, typically when we're designing a contextual campaign, the first step is to understand this audience that the advertiser is looking to reach out to, and help them make this mind shift of going not just behind the audience, but this real-time interest. What are the right contexts that are going to be the ones where the user is going to be more engaged with? He's going to be more willing to listen, to understand what you have to say. And usually this is a very robust process that we can do, where we just map that into predefined contextual segments, which is very precise, very robust, and works very well, especially in cases such as, say, a brand that is looking to talk to their users who are interested in fashion or about sports, etc. So this is something that in those cases works extremely well. But unfortunately, this process is not always exactly that easy. Say that we got the following campaign brief. This is from a real fashion brand who wanted to contact consumers concerned about fast fashion pollution and its impact on the environment, who are interested in sustainable and materials. Okay, so obviously this is a lot more specific than the fashion and sports example, right? And if we were to take this and somehow fit this into predefined contextual context, well, and using the IAB categorization as a starting point, we'd probably end up with these three categories. So fashion trends, apparel industry, and environment. And you're looking at them and saying, okay, so yeah, they are relevant. So these topics are relevant to what the brief was saying. But there's some context missing here. There's something missing that is actually connecting these three elements, which are independent. So if we could somehow understand, from the world of content, these small little colored dots would be the content universe, as we refer to it, which would be all the web and all the articles and all the topics that are being talked about. And we could understand what the exact right contexts are, which would be this white blob in the middle. By approximating them with these three categories that we've talked about, we're bringing in a lot of different contexts which are individually relevant, but there's no, unifying guide that's bringing that all together. There's nothing saying here that what's important is the pollution produced by these production processes. We're just talking about environment or about apparel, but not really connecting the dots here. And then, obviously, this example came from the contextual world, but if you're doing, audience-based targeting, behavioral targeting, you're pretty much in the same boat here. There's no off-the-shelf categories that you can go into your DMP to and just take, and they're going to map exactly what we were saying in this brief. You're just going to be doing some kind of translation process, same as what we were doing here before. And this translation process is obviously going to be subject to some kind of translation error. There's going to be noise introduced. So it's never going to be perfect. And this problem, it's obviously not new. This is a super old problem, but I think it's one that is both fascinating and one where I think there's a lot more that we can do to improve. So the question that we've been working on at Seedtag for a while is, what if we could get rid of these predefined buckets, call that audiences, call that contexts, where it makes sense, and instead leverage technology to build something that is going to provide a custom campaign-specific segment. Okay, what would that look like? And the answer to that question is I want to talk to you a bit about. We came up with something that we have called Custom AI. So Custom AI is a product that we're releasing now, which allows us to take the campaign brief in its written form and using artificial intelligence, establish the relationship of each piece of content on the web to that brief. It combines the experience of years of artificial intelligence technology that we've been building with state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, state-of-the-art techniques to achieve a whole new level of on-target impressions. And thanks to being built on top of a contextual layer, it allows us to reach more scale than other solutions and also be more future-proof in this privacy-first world. And because we're standing here in the tech, on the tech stage, I want to give you a brief glimpse about how this actually works under the hood so you have an idea of how it works. So, as I said, this starts off using the campaign brief in text as it is. But you might know that computers are actually not very good at working with text. They're more numbers people. So the first thing is to get that campaign brief and translate it into numbers in a way that it's going to allow us to do math on it, which is what artificial intelligence and AI really is about. This process is what we call an embedding process. And it turns this text into what's called a high-dimensional vector, which in other words is just a very large bunch of numbers. But the magic of this process is that these seemingly random numbers actually retain the semantic information, the meaning of what was actually being said in that text. Once we've done this transformation, what we do is that we use it as a query for a very big database that we've been building up over the years, which contains hundreds of millions of articles that we've already analyzed in the past. And by querying this database, we get a subset of those articles that are really relevant for that brief, which characterize that brief very well. We then take these articles and use them as a training set to train a new machine learning model, which is going to learn, by feeding it example after example of what is relevant and what's not relevant to distinguish the articles that it should focus on once it's gone into production. And after a process of just training it with all this data, we have a ready-to-go model that can analyze all the content on the web and the real-time content and understand which ones are relevant for that campaign brief and which ones are not. So for me, what's so special about this is that building this kind of customized technology is only usually within reach of the largest advertisers in the world, those who have access to massive engineering teams and data teams, etc. And even them, the effort to build this kind of stuff and to build it, to test it, and to put it into production actually, usually doesn't pay off, or it's way too much for them. And again, we're talking about the big ones. You're leaving out a lot of the smaller guys here. And thanks to Custom AI, what we're allowing them is to get access to this custom-built technology that's sustained on years of proprietary research in the contextual advertising space and all the historical data that we've gathered, and then activate it however they need it in a matter of minutes instead of months or years. So that's extremely powerful. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about what this is, how it works, etc. But what's the result of this? What is this used to? What does it give us? We ran, as part of a closed beta program that we did with some of our largest advertisers, we ran a number of test campaigns on a third-party panel, where we measured the impact of a custom AI-based campaign against one using predefined contexts. And what we saw there is that the amount of impressions that were actually relevant to that brief, what we call the affinity index, raised by 92%. And this actually translated into a consideration uplift of 23% and a brand recall of 22%. So we're very excited about these results. These are the first results getting out there with real campaigns. We believe there's still a lot more that we can do, but seeing the advancements that we've done here, we wanted to start rolling this out to more advertisers and seeing you guys use this. So we're very excited about the future. We already have a lot of ideas of how we're going to continue to improve this and how this is going to continue to push forward what the industry can do. So yeah.
Well done. Yeah, it's all about the results, right? None of this really matters if it doesn't deliver outcomes for our customers. So we are new to the U.S. Again, we're not a new company. We're not a startup by any means, but we entered the U.S. market about 3 months ago. And our goal is to be the leading contextual partner for both brands and publishers. And if we think about all the briefs that I've seen over the years, the detailed work that buyers and planners put together and analyzing their audiences, you don't want to give that to a vendor and have them just go buy some prepackaged segment or throw in a show or two there, right? You put work into analyzing who that should be. Now custom AI can really deliver the results that you thought about when you built your strategy. So we're here to be a partner for both publishers trying to understand how they're showing up and what people are leaning into, as well as advertisers that are trying to connect with their customers in more meaningful ways, thinking about the very content that they care about in that moment, not being awkward, being more relevant, showing up in a positive way, and ultimately driving those results. So thank you for your time, and Brian at Seedtag.com.
Thanks.